Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution? Or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical Sexologist Dr. Martha Tara Lee will explore all these and more on Eros Evolution on OMTimes Radio.
Welcome to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. My name is Martha. I am a sexologist based in Singapore, and my company is called Eros Coaching. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, Eros Coaching, EROS Coaching.com. And today, we have a very special show. It is the 1st of May in Singapore, 4 a.m., and this is a very special day. It's a public holiday, it's Labor Day, and it is also the start of my Masturbation Month campaign. Every year in the month of May, I will have a campaign called Masturbation Month, where we will celebrate the act of loving ourselves, and I'm talking about solo love, self-pleasure, and I started this campaign because in US they have this campaign as well, and started because Jocelyn Elders, who was fired because of a statement that she said about masturbation being healthy. Because she got fired, so Good Vibrations, the sex shop, decided to launch this campaign, and so in Singapore I decided to do likewise. Every year I send out educational information, and you can sign up as well for Masturbation Month in May by visiting this link, eroscoaching.com/masturbation month, or you can subscribe to all the different things that I have, the different campaigns, by going to eroscoaching.com/subscription-options with an S, /. Yeah. So back onto this show. Today is very, very special. As this would be the third reason why today is special. I have a recap of all the different shows that I've had so far, and there have been 15 minus 1. I'll explain more about the minus 1. So 14 shows that I'll be summarizing in the next 1 hour. So stay tuned. We have Sexuality and Spirituality recap today. The first show that I had back then in January was with Lawrence Lanoff, and that was the first time I was hosting a show, and he was fabulous. If you listen to show number 1, you will realize that he was very calm in the face of all the fluster that I was experiencing. I had difficulties with patching him into the show for about 7 minutes. So what did I learn from Lawrence? One of the things that I learned from him is how he experienced his own sexual awakening, and he was able to begin to see life from being black and white to being technicolor. And when you are awakened, it's not just with your sexuality, it's actually your whole body. Sexuality was just a way in which his attitude towards life had transcended, and where what is hidden became clear. This was when he decided to become a teacher himself. He talked about how our sexuality is very much related to our power, and this rich texture bliss that we experience is something so powerful that he began to understand why it's not something we can control and not something we can contain. And perhaps that's why so many people are interested in controlling and containing this, because if you can do that, then you control people. He talked a lot about the importance of focusing on feeling good versus great. So lots of us just want to be okay. However, great is another level of it. This is when we feel great, our energy field expands, and he was very much encouraging all of us to focus on feeling that for ourselves. He talked about being able to relax into womb space, our whole bodies, our crown chakras, right to our toes, so that we have a feeling of just being alive and of being. He talked about clear light, of how being that person would help us to make lots of shifts in our lives. I was asking him about how actually to have this sexual awakening that he experienced. And he said that for some people, the awareness and realization that the importance of feeling good, the power of our sexuality with our whole being is important. Sometimes just one discussion is enough to illuminate for some people, and for others, they still need to go through some of the underlying belief systems and moral conditions that we experience. He has tremendous presence on the show, and even just listening to him helped to shift certain things just from him sharing his being on the show. So you definitely want to check out his show because of that very fact. In the second show, I was actually the only person on the show. I was exploring the link between sexuality and spirituality for myself. I was sharing what made me who I am, how I became a sexologist. I talked about the role of my mom influencing my sexuality. I talked about what I learned in sexological body work. I talked about orgasmic yoga and how it helped me shift from depression. I talked about experiencing energy orgasm and what you would be able to find if you went online. And at this point, I would like to talk a little bit about my book that I'm writing, my second book called Orgasmic Yoga. And I'm doing crowdfunding right now. So you can go to Publishizer. That's PUBLISHIZER. So if you key this in and you look for Orgasmic Yoga, you should be able to find my book. So I'm doing crowdfunding on this book because I love how important and transformative it has been for me. And because I'm so passionate about it, I decided to pull all the practices together for Masturbation Month, and then realized as I did that how awesome it was and how I could just so easily just publish it into a physical hard copy rather than a small teeny weeny ebook. So I hope you can support my project, Orgasmic Yoga. With the third guest, Laurie Handlers. She is a Tantra teacher, and her company is Butterfly Workshops. She talked about how energies of creation is masculine and feminine, and how these energies can be used for creating anything. Creating things that can transform the world, that we can use to prolong our lives. We can use it for anti-aging. We could use it for our studies, for attracting love. And some ways in which we can harness our sexual energy is in taking the time, first of all, for ourselves. And then we can do certain practices that involves our breath, sound, movement, setting intention, as well as taking on our own responsibility of clearing out our guilt, shame, blame around sexuality. When we do that, when we start doing these practices and we cultivate, we actually learn how to make our sexuality work for ourselves. There's a misconception that in order to practice Tantra, we need a partner. And we don't need a partner to practice Tantra. We can practice Tantra by ourselves. And in fact, it's recommended because you don't want to add another dimension before you can even become comfortable with it. She talked about the importance of how our sexuality is very much repressed in many cultures, countries, and many groups and religions. And because our sexuality is so powerful, anything that is suppressed will just find a way to come out by itself. There is no separation for her in terms of sexuality and spirituality, no separation between body and mind. And we have just been taught by some religious study or some other religious order that our mind is one thing and the body is another. And that the mind is the most important, when actually it is our body that has suffered because of this belief. And when we come back to that, our sexuality, that Tantra can be a way in which we can go into having a spiritual path. My fourth guest, Deanna Bonwick, on the show Owning Your Powerful Sexuality to Manifest Money, she talked about the importance of being present in our body, especially our pelvis, and being connected with a conscious tribe. So, for instance, people who would build us up. She talked about her own experience of being a mother, losing her child after 3 days, and how nature healed her when she got in touch with the rhythms of life in nature, and she was able to heal herself and the trauma that her body had gone through through her labor. Her show was focusing more about feminine sexuality. So she talked about how our bodies are so powerful and can create life. This energy that is free to fully fill our whole bodies. So this is a recap of the 4 shows. So we'll be back for more shows.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
Radio Namaste leads you down the yellow brick road into portals of consciousness with the blue-collar goddess as your host. Interviews with humans who could be famous or just popular, and answers to everything are on the agenda. Tune into OMTimes Radio and drop in on Thursdays at 3 Eastern. It's a different brand of enlightenment.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. This is Martha, and in today's show, we are recapping all the different learnings that I've gained from my previous guests in the past 14 episodes, including one myself. So I just did a quick summary of the first 4 shows that I had on Eros Evolution. The first one being with Lawrence Lanoff, the second with myself, and the third with Laurie Handlers, the fourth with Deanna Bonwick. And the 5th show, the intended 5th show, was unfortunately not never recorded because I actually missed my own show, and I was very devastated and very apologetic to my guests. However, since then, I have made efforts to make sure I don't miss my own show, because I really want to do a good job and be able to bring forth this gift of understanding and higher wisdom to listeners. So the fourth show didn't really happen. The fifth show was with Lori Lorich, and in the show, she's a tantra teacher, and she does sexological body work. That means hands-on work through the use of breath work, guided visualization, energy and sound healing, pelvic release work. And on the show, she talked about how all of us can bring more life into our selves, into our bodies, through our five senses. It can be a 15 to 30 second practice of feeling, being in touch with more sound, bring awareness to our breath, our taste, our touch. And this will begin to train our minds. When we begin to be able to shift awareness easily with using our senses through the day, then we will be able to also be much more conscious in the bedroom. This is when we can begin to be able to use sexual energy in much more powerful ways. She talks about the importance of our breath in increasing our connection, increasing our life force, being able to move energies through our body, as well as being able to create a circuitry between partners to increase our states and to even feel one with the universe. She talked about the role, as I mentioned, with sound and with movement, with mind, just like Laurie Handler's. And she talks about vibration that can help shift and move to where we feel numbness in our bodies. A lot of the emphasis is on sensation. She talked about yin and yang, which a lot of us understand is masculine and feminine. In yang, it's more about force, energy, violence, maybe even destruction. For yin is the importance of allowing and surrendering and just being. So these practices that she talked about, a lot of it is about just being relaxed and being less focused on results and more on the process of just unfolding. So that's Lori Lorich on episode 5 and on episode 6. And on episode 7, we have Patty Britton on the 26th of February. She is actually my supervisor, and she is a very well-known sexologist, and as well as sexuality educator and teacher and mentor of many people. She owns Sex Coach U, and on the show, she talked about her memes model. Memes being MEBES. M stands for mind, emotions, followed by E, emotions, and B, body image or physical, and then that's E for energetic and S for spiritual. So when I asked her about what she does with people who are not comfortable with using spirituality, she talked about how she sometimes just talks about energy, which anyone can understand. In the show, she talked about a lot. Actually, she covered a lot of practical tips around how our spirit is the essence of who we are, and how sex is a little bit like a flame. We bring oxygen to the air to reignite them so that it becomes a fire. And this flame is who we are. So we bring oxygen and we become brighter. And this is a metaphor of how when we get quiet, I liken it to a flame in a candle's flame, or even embers glowing when the wood has quietened down in the fireplace, and they are just to be reignited by fanning them. Bringing oxygen in the air reignites them and they become bigger. So that's beautiful what she said. And when she talked about our spirit or spiritual path or pathways that can help evoke a sense of the sacred and how we regard ourselves and our partners as sexual being, this ability that we have to connect spirit to spirit, and this ability to align another human being may sound a bit strange. However, it's something so spiritual and sacred and mystic and powerful about this very act of sexual intercourse that she believes that we actually have, as a lot of my guests mentioned, we have a divine birthright to express our authentic sexual selves. She talked about the importance of solo practice and lifestyle management, how we are addicted to electronics and how we can create mood, we can find sources of positive energy all around us. And she encouraged listeners to make sounds during sex and after by talking and, of course, making sounds like moaning. She talked about how profound it is to have routine, where these routines act as anchor that will help us to relax, come back very quickly into our bodies, and help us to open up to our partners much more quickly. She talks about the importance of having messages of love and care between each other, and how even shamanism like drumming can help us in terms of being able to get in touch with shifting energy in the spaces and within our bodies. So lots and lots of tips that Patty actually gave in her show. I definitely recommend episode 7. In episode 8, I had another teacher of mine, Rachel Jane Grover, who started this movement called the Art of Feminine Presence, which I'm running in Singapore. And her show was called Feminine, Present, and Spiritual. In Art of Feminine Presence, there are 44 practices. She talked about the importance of being still within your body, the subtle energy that we have that runs through us, how being with ourselves actually helps us to increase our presence. And this includes being in our pelvis. When we're home in our womb space, this is when we are able to take these practices and apply it to real life, and not just, how some people just do their yoga on the mat and then leave everything behind throughout the day. That's not what Art of Feminine Presence is about. And when we can stay in our womb space, this is when we are powerful, and how we are able to show up very differently, how we as women or men won't get bullied. She did a demonstration on the show between the difference of being in head space and womb space. So if you are interested to find out how you can stay in your womb space, you definitely want to listen to show number 8 on the 5th of March with Rachel Jane Grover. So there were 4 keys that she talked about: the importance of being aware of our bodies, the second being with our energy, the third with our voice, and the fourth with our relationship with fear. These 4 things, if we can master them, will make us feminine, present, powerful, and spiritual. A lot of these things, the men might be wondering, how is this relevant to you? It is very much relevant even for men. For women, our womb space is 3 inches below our belly button and deeper into our body. For men, it is 2 inches below your belly button and deeper into your body. So just visualize there's a point there. Visualize something like a crystal or flower. And when we are connected to somewhere lower in our bodies, which actually is the center of our bodies, we actually become more present and powerful immediately. My 9th guest is actually a couple, Rob and Janine, Alex, and they talked about transcendent lovemaking, where there's a difference between physical sex versus lovemaking. How when we can transcend into lovemaking, this is when sex can help us to tap into our creativity. Sex can be fun, exciting, with lots of laughter. And they talked about their experiences with spirituality, and pretty amazing that they have multiple books, and one of their book, Sexy Challenges, has had 400,000 downloads on iTunes. They are actually quite intuitive and sensitive, which I didn't realize before I had them onto the show. They have an amazing chemistry, and they were able to finish each other's sentences and thoughts. And so it was fabulous having them model for me how a beautiful spiritual relationship can feel like or sound like. And you would like to perhaps catch this show, which is episode 9. So I just did a very quick summary of another 4 shows. Let me just read their names again. Laurie Lorich, Patty Britton, Rachel Jane Grover, Rob and Janelle Alex. And you definitely want to catch the episodes, especially, well, I have so many favorites, so I like you to go back and listen to all the shows. However, if one of them appeals to you more than other, then feel free to listen to it. I have all these fabulous guests who have come on, and they've taught me so much with just their being, really. And I hope this little summary doesn't really do them justice. So more after this break.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive, dedicated community. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Welcome back to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. And you're listening to Eros Evolution on OMTimes Radio Network. You can share this show with your friends by sending them the link omtimes.com/mobile. This is a link that will allow them to listen to our show without needing to use any app. And your friends will love it because it's really convenient. And this is actually using advanced technology in order to do so. So let's go on to recapping all the different shows that I've had on Eros Evolution so far. And I've just talked about how my different guests from episode 1 to 9. And we'll talk about 10 to 13 right now. In episode 10, I had Lee Harrington, who talked about authentic sexuality and sacred kink. He explained to me what kink meant, which is a much more bigger and encompassing term that actually encapsulates, that includes BDSM, which stands for bondage, domination, some sadomasochism, and because kink actually includes things like power play and role playing and fetish, which BDSM doesn't really cover. And as he began to explain this to me, he began to also talk about the concept of how kink can be sacred and spiritual. He talked about 3 main things that people can do to experience sacred kink. The first one being ecstatic practice. It doesn't mean giving away your worldly goods. It can be as simple as being maybe practices like meditation or mindfulness. Such practices will help us to be able to get into the realm of the sacred much more quickly. The second being rhythm, how our breath is one way in order to have rhythms. And for instance, the use of drums can be another way of incorporating rhythm. And the third point that he mentioned is about the path of the flesh. And by this, he means being very much present in what we're feeling in our bodies. For instance, when we have fingers running through the flesh, that is very much the path of the flesh, using our bodies to help us get deeper. Spanking is another one. You can have the path of the flesh using the bodies as well as rhythm. For instance, spanking. And then you begin to see, yeah, I get it. BDSM can be a way in order to access the spirituality through our sexuality, and how the link between the two is really fun. Within, of course, limits for different people and within certain safety guidelines. He is just such a powerful, beautiful, sweet presence about him. You really would like to listen to this show if you're curious about anything to do with kink or BDSM. On the 11th episode, I had Sally Reeves Conway, and she talks about receptivity, how being receptive will help us to stop blocking ourselves and finally get what we want. Like my previous guest, she also talked about the concept between the masculine and the feminine, and with emphasis on the feminine being much more about our being and the link between our physical body and our energetic body. Our energetic body being the energy that we are radiating out of our bodies, just like, I'm just putting this in my own words, just like how we can feel the energy radiating off a laptop, we also have an energetic presence. And she talked about how when we are able to access and be aware of both our physical and energetic presence, this is when we can use it as a toolbox, and this is when we can have much more confidence about ourselves and with our lives. As for receptivity, she talks about how being receptive will actually help us be more present. And how being receptive also means being more open, more curious about life, and having the space so that more can come into our lives, feeling empowered, being more in our feminine rather than masculine, being receptive, and how being able to be much more aware of this feminine energy will help us to build and reclaim our place within our lives. It's like an inhale, being receptive. So when we are not receptive, however, we can feel out of balance in our health, in our bodies, and with money. When we are also not receptive, this is when we can find ourselves being at the edge of opportunities, of love, of relationships, who are just that bit close to getting what we want, and then somehow it just does not happen. There seems to be a limit to receiving and how much. Therefore, she recommended that we do a receiving meditation. When we start to do that, then we can actually receive more into our lives. So she actually gave 3 very simple steps in order to be more receptive. The first one, stop. Stop whatever you're doing. Just be aware. The second is to ask yourself what's really going on. And the third, to go deeper. To go deeper once you have had that awareness that, I'm having fear, I'm having blocks. Once we can do that, then this is when we can take better decisions for ourselves. And that was Sally Reeves Conway who was sharing about receptivity. On episode 12, on the 2nd of April, I had Kitty Pride, who talked about sexuality in hip-hop music and culture. Kitty Pride is an African American, and she's also with Sex Coach U. She's a student with Sex Coach U, and she's passionate about music. She explained on the show the link between hip-hop and our sexuality because of the references and the sexual innuendos, and how some of that language can be very crude, but it's actually a reflection of culture. There are people who are now going into hip-hop, who are using hip-hop as a way to advocate for more tolerance, and a lot of this sexuality hate words that are coming forth, they're changing it. So like misogyny and things like not really understanding about people who are different. By different, I mean like people who are gay, lesbian, transgendered, bisexual. So through hip-hop, there are people who are going into the genre and creating advocacy opportunities. She talked about the importance of words and how words can kill, how within the community of hip-hop, people who are forced to be, to come out, and people who are not ready, other people's calling them out, and how when they're not ready, and some of the hate language comes forth, there have been people who have killed themselves, and so she was speaking out against that. She talks about how parents can, or people who are curious about hip-hop music can get into it, and who and what and where they can find some resources. She talked about how parents can begin to understand their kids through hip-hop. And she talked about one of the biggest thing about the show is her passion. You can hear that she has such a strong presence on air, and how her passion for hip-hop just comes through. She herself doesn't really do hip-hop. However, she really appreciates it. So she called for tolerance, and this is what she said. She quoted my supervisor, Patty, and she said, sexuality is what we do. Sex is who we are. And so she paraphrased this. She said, sexuality is what we do. Hip-hop is who we are. Beautiful. So check out Sexuality in Hip-Hop Music if that's what you're interested in. In episode 13, we had Reverend Dr. Beverly Dale, who talked about how we can explore God as Eros. She actually came from a religious family, and when she talks about God as Eros, she essentially is talking about how we can view God as passion. With God, we can connect with creation. We can see how a person of Jesus can come to you and give you life. And she talked about how access to God as passion equals being able to access to our creativity. She talked about God as lover and how he longs for connection with us. And we talked a little bit about whether God is a woman. And when we talked about that, we talked about the feminine side, the nurturing side of God, and she was comfortable with using metaphors like a midwife, being of grace, being compassionate, and so I was able to understand from her a lot about how some of the things that people say about religion is very much, in her perspective, culture. How because of culture, so certain things about sex has become misrepresented, and she normalized a lot of it, and she talked about how she is one of the voices that is talking about how sexuality is beautiful, wonderful, amazing. She also talked about the importance of loving ourselves, trusting our inner wisdom. She mentioned the unholy trinity, which is guilt, shame, and fear. She talked about how when we judge God, we essentially judging ourselves by saying that touching our body is wrong. We're essentially saying that we know better than God because God gave us our parts, and obviously our hands reach to our genitals. So how can that be bad or wrong? And we have biological parts that are made for pleasure, and therefore we should enjoy it. So that is Reverend Dr. Beverly Dale. You would want to listen to her because she's the one guest that I had who actually is from the Christian faith, and she was able to talk about sex in such a beautiful, wonderful, compassionate way. And if you have any issues around sexuality that needs healing, perhaps listening to this show would be able to help. On my 14th episode, on the 16th of April, I had Diane Merpal. She talked about how our sexuality is a gift. And because she herself is an older woman, she's in her 50s with 3 children. And so she actually went into learning about sexology because she was interested in it for herself. And we'll talk more about Diane Merpal after this break.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM-FM. Join Elliot Jollish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jollish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jollish Hour.
Know what to do, just can't figure out how to fit it all into your busy life? It doesn't have to be that way. Hi, I'm Ellen Baisberg from Seamless Life. Join me every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio and learn the how of conscious living. Let me and my guests help make your life seamless.
Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Simone Milasas would like you to know that business can be fun, which is why she wrote the book, Joy of Business. What if you could have the joy of business rather than the stress and struggle? Most of the time, the only thing stopping you from a thriving business is you. In the Joy of Business book, Simone gives you access consciousness tools and pragmatic ways to get out of your own way and to create the business, life, and living you know is possible and beyond what this reality says is achievable. Business is joy. It's creation. It's generative. It can be the adventure of living. You can purchase your copy of the book through Amazon or Joy of Business website, www.accessjoyofbusiness.com. The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM-FM.
Welcome back to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. My name is Martha. I'm a sexologist, and you can follow me on eroscoaching.com/subscription-options, and you'll be able to subscribe to all the different campaigns that I have, including Fabulove, Eco-Sex, Masturbation Month, and also my Mother's Day and Father's Day campaign, where I provide a lot of free content. And I also right now am doing crowdfunding for my second book called Orgasmic Yoga, and you can find it on Publicizer. That's PUB. So if you key in PUBLISHIZER on Google, you'll be able to add in Orgasmic Yoga, and you should be able to find the direct link to my book where you can pre-order it and support my project so that I can actually raise enough funds in order to publish the book. And so let's come back to the show. Today I'm doing a recap of all my different guests. And so far I've done a little quick recap of each of my guests up to episode 13. And I have 14 and 15 left. So I was just mentioning just now before the break that I had Diane Merpal on the show talking about how our sexuality is a gift. And she is a woman in her 50s and she experienced low sex drive. So she was actually personally curious for herself on how she could overcome this, which she did. So she talked about on the show the idea of coming up with a sex bucket list, just like we come up with a bucket list of the things that we want to do before we die. We can definitely do something like that. We could be much more connected with our self-pleasure so that we come back into our bodies and so that we can express it much more easily when we are with our partners. She talked about the importance of genital massage, and she also gave us 3 ways in which we can be just much more comfortable with our bodies. The first one being the use of affirmations or positive talk. So every day, come up with 3 ways in which you love yourself. Sounds easy, not so hard as you continue in trying to find something different in which you love yourself every day. The second idea that she had was to do boudoir, and that's sensuous photography that will help men and women, I guess women, feel much more comfortable with portraying or unleashing, allowing their sexy side to come forth. The third one also starts with B, which is burlesque. That has helped her a lot as well. And so she was suggesting boudoir, burlesque, and 3 ways in which you can love yourself today. For men, she was giving the suggestion of slowing way down. So very, very practical tips that she had. She, of course, just like many of my guests, she also talked about the importance of our sexuality as our birthright, including how it helps us to be much more creative and how our sexuality is unique to us. She also talked about something very interesting to me, at least to me. She talked about ancestral clearing and how it is passed through to us through our lineage, and how ancestral clearing can help us through certain kinds of trauma, not necessarily sexual trauma, and that can help us to be much more happy. And if you listen to each of these shows, sometimes some of my guests, they have special gifts, and Diane Merpal was one of them. So I'll let you listen to the show for yourself to find out what her gift was. And just last week, I had M. Kali Hashinki, who she talked about the exploring your direct connection to the divine, and she is an erotic wellness facilitator as well as a sexological body worker. And she talked about how our body is a container and helps open us up to our spirituality. Our breath can also help us to connect with divine. And she talks a lot about the importance of breath and how she coaches her clients to get access into their bodies, into their energies, into divine through breath. She also talked about how when we are conscious, we can actually tap into ecstasy, ecstatic experiences, ecstasy, and to spirituality. So just like She gave many examples: athletes, musicians, singers, meditation, yoga, dancers, runners. They all experience some form of ecstasy through their bodies, and we can too through sex with consciousness and awareness. She also, just like Reverend Beth Dale, she also talked about how our body is made for pleasure, and how when we use our bodies as a vehicle for its intended purpose, we are actually in communion with God. We are using it as a way of saying thank you because we're using our bodies. And she also said that it's not for us to decide that we know more than God, and that certain things are wrong, and we make certain decisions on behalf of God, that He made a mistake. And my guests have so much wisdom. When you hear similar things from different people, you cannot but start to realize that it is the truth, because my guests are coming from different cultures, backgrounds, nationalities, religions, and a lot of them, they are saying the same thing. They are saying that our sexuality is our birthright. All of them, most of them, when I ask them. So I am summarizing to you what a lot of them are saying, and they are saying essentially a lot of them are repeating the same kind of messages. And sometimes for those of us who are slow learners, we need to hear the same message in different ways, by different people, with different kinds of presence and essence of who they are. And then maybe finally we get it and then go, just like how Kali Hashinki, she was talking about the link between our mouth and with our anus, and how essentially it is linked. What goes in comes out. And how when we have blockages and we're stuck and we're not breathing, then obviously energy doesn't move through us. And it's like, I never heard it quite the way she expressed it. And so it just was, it's just like different little nuggets of wisdom. As a sexologist, I appreciate, because I learned how to sharpen myself and my ability to express and explain to clients. So all these little nuggets are little things that I pick up and learn from other people, and then I incorporate it into my work. So I really like having been able to be the host and have on so many amazing people and then learn from them. So Kali Hashinki also talked about how we can meditate before sex as a way to open up our sexual energies and channels and create a safe space and container for that experience. She talked about how certain simple things like holding hands, breathing, doing eye gazing will help connect with your partner energetically. And these are some ways in which sex is no longer just a physical act. This is when it becomes a way to connect to the divine. So I just did a very quick summary of all my 15 shows. And let me do a very quick, again, another summary of what I've heard from them. The similarities is I keep hearing again and again from all my guests, as I mentioned just now, that sex is our birthright. It is from God. There's no mistake about it, that we have blocks and blockages because of our culture, our upbringing, and negative messages, and how we need to learn how to overcome some of them by, first of all, being open and curious about it, and learning from different sources, so that this becomes something that is ours and ours, not just what people tell us about. From the tantricas, the body workers, I've learned again and again, they keep repeating the importance of our breath and other ways in which we can incorporate tools so as to have much more ecstatic spiritual experiences. So not just breath, we can use sound, movement, intention, our minds, in order to have better access to bliss and ecstasy. If you want to listen to lots of tips relating to connecting with our sexuality, you want to listen to episode 7, Patty Britton, and you want to perhaps listen to Diane Merpal on episode 14. if you want to listen to episodes relating to female sexuality, you will want to listen to Rachel Jane Groover on episode 8, Sally Reeves Conway on episode 10, Deanna Bonwick on episode 5, and Diane Merpau on episode 14 again. And if you want to listen to a couple model for you, what it means to be in sync with each other and to be able to function and have ecstatic experiences as a couple, you want to listen to Rob and Janelle on episode 9. And if you want to listen to Eros as God, you want to listen to Sexuality in the form of Christian faith, you want to listen to Rev Bev on episode 13. So I did a very, very quick recap of all the different shows that I had and all the different guests and all the different things that I've learned from them. I hope you enjoyed listening to me do this summary, and keep listening to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. And next week I'll be having another guest. Her name is Felicia Hunt, and she'll be talking about let me just check the title of her show. She'll be talking about sexuality and spirituality with Felicia Hunt. So keep listening to Eros Evolution. And if you'd like to give me any feedback, please do so by emailing me on info@eroscoaching.com. I'd love to hear from you if you're listening to this show. So thank you and goodbye.